Okay, okay, okay. Mic check, mic check. Okay, okay, okay. Hey, YouTube. I'm back here with a little bit different of a video. So we are going to basically today just provide a channel introduction and go over our methodology. We will start with a recap of tonight's games. I'm not going to lay any wagers for Sunday. I tend to avoid betting on Sunday. Kind of superstitious, but I mean, I tend to lose a lot when I bet on Sunday, so, I try to use it as a rest day, and then during the day, we'll try to attack the lines for Monday as soon as they come out and try to get an edge in that way. So let's just discuss the games. I was able to get some revenge today and went 7 of 10 on the bets that I had put in my videos. So really happy with it. We ended the week up like 12 units and a little bit more actually. So great week, great week. We just gotta hope it continues here. That's why I take the day off tomorrow and then get right back into it. So first game, Florida State versus Georgia Tech. Florida State destroyed them for the most part. For the most part, I guess not really. So the Florida State took a huge advantage in the beginning, and then it kind of became close in the second half. I definitely was a little worried at the beginning of the second half, but over the course of it, they kind of took a pretty significant lead, especially at the end, then winning by double digits here. So Georgia Tech is just pretty terrible, and Florida State is just like an okay team. Like, nothing to really write home about, but they're pretty good. They can beat bad teams easily. So they haven't had like a ton of great wins, but I like them against, average and bad teams for sure. So they took that one home on the road as a favorite. Thank you, Florida State. Next game, we got Boston University versus American University. And this game was like probably the easiest win of the day, surprisingly. I mean, I had them as a slight favorite, and they're getting points, so I always like those games. They don't always work out, of course, but in this case, it sure did. They destroyed them, no sweat. American University isn't very good, so I was happy to see the Terriers come in, get the W for us. So thank you, Boston University. And then the next bet was an over. So I don't take a lot of totals bets on this channel. I don't really like taking over unders. I don't really win them as much as, bets against the spread. So I try to take them sparingly and only if I feel really strongly about it. In this case, I did. And I leaned Seton Hall, who ended up covering easily. They really put up a good fight against UConn in this game, and I was kind of surprised with that. But per my prediction, I said they would keep it if they kept it close, it would go over, and it did. So happy with the win. That's my second over bet that I hit this week. So it was a good win. And then now on to my first loss, NC State. This is a team that I actually kind of flagged as questionable in prior videos. And usually when I do that, I don't bet that team. But I just felt like maybe it was a reversion opportunity with the beatdown that they took in their last game. But I was wrong. They didn't look good. They didn't look good at all. So they did not cover this for us, unfortunately. And I mean, they lost outright, so definitely concerning, but we'll see in the future, like, cause now they're off of two rough losses. So maybe we'll get a buy low opportunity on them. I mean, it's gonna be hard to bet them again after taking back-to-back losses, but losing by 6 to Notre Dame, I don't know. That's not good. Then moving on to our second loss, Iowa. This is a team that we laid 9.5 with against Penn State, and they lost outright. Thought they would push it to overtime, they ended up not and just losing in regular in the second half. So yeah, disappointing. Definitely not good for Iowa. But I wish we would have maybe spent more time looking into the Penn State schedule on this one. I've won a lot of bets with Penn State this year. They do tend to cover a lot. They tend to put up a good fight against good teams. So wish I would have avoided this one, but here we are. So it is what it is. Next game, UMBC Retrievers going on the road to play UMass Lowell. So thesis was pretty simple here. I mean, we were projecting them as a pretty heavy favorite, and they were only laying, I think, 1.5 to 2.5. So I really just liked the game off of that, and I liked the game off of just the success that UMass Lowell has been having. Thought that would end, and it did. I just found it crazy that we have Vermont laying 10.5 points versus this same team, and then a couple days later, you're telling me UMBC is only laying 1.5. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to pass up on that. So happy we took it. Happy it won. Next game, Missouri. They destroyed Mississippi State. I mean, I didn't really expect them to destroy them that bad. I mean, I definitely liked them. They had a good edge in the model, so we ended up going with them. We couldn't really find a reason not to back them, and it came through. They demolished Mississippi State, so could be a buy low for Mississippi State in a couple of days. We'll see what's going on. Like Mississippi State tends to lose a few and then come back with a win, so we'll see how it's looking. Then next L was Louisville. I wish we would have been more careful with this game. I mean, Louisville depends on the three, so it's it's easy for them to lose sometimes. I mean, they put up somewhat of a fight, but we should not have faded Clemson off of all of those losses. That just wasn't smart. I mean, looking at Clemson's schedule, they have a proven ability to win. They're a ranked team, and we should not have doubted them that much. I regret it. I mean, looking back is 2020, but yeah, it just kind of goes against some of my core principles in kind of avoiding games where the opponent is off a lot of losses and they have that proven ability to win. So that was a bad bet. Then for the last two, Wisconsin, no sweat, came in and destroyed them off a huge loss. I love Wisconsin off a huge loss, and they were on the road as a favorite, and there's like not a moment in this game where there was any doubt. So that was another great one. And then last game, Oregon. I loved this game too. I mean, we were projecting around to pick them or around maybe even them as a slight favorite versus a pretty average, below average team. And, we had some qualitative factors that we liked. Obviously, Biddle coming back was huge. So, another great win. So, let's go ahead and get to the show. I am basically just going to discuss my methodology and, you know, for the most part, like our core strategy is we take straight bets with 50-50 implied probability and we try to find a slight edge on them to pick the games with the best edge and just try to win, try to win at a rate of around 60% or more. So let's see what we got. Okay. So our approach is very simple. We have a two-step approach. We screen the games. And then when we screen the games and find potential opportunities, we then look for reasons not to bet them. And if we cannot find good reasons not to bet them, and we find good reasons to bet them, we take it. So not too complicated there. And how are we screening the games? We are using a very simple approach that is just looking at points scored versus points allowed within comparable samples for each team. So we typically look at 5 different samples and we take the average of those samples to predict a line. And then when the line looks off, that is when we investigate. So step two is going to be finding reasons not to bet. So I really like this approach because I mean, finding reasons to bet and then taking the game sometimes will throw you off a little bit. So I try to use just a basic approach to screen and then look for any reason I can to not bet it. And when I find a reason, I move on to the next game. You know, there's plenty of games to bet. You don't have to bet every game. So find a reason not to bet a game you like. And if you find that reason, don't bet it. And so we kind of look for the statistical advantage within the model, and then we'll try to do a sanity check on the result. So we're going to look for basically mean reversion, conflicts, or opportunities within the schedule or within the performance against the spread. We will set and update rules based on observations, and we will conceptualize qualitative factors too. So, more on this, but that's the approach. We're screening with a simple model and then looking for reasons to not take the bet. And then when we can't find one, we take it. Okay. So this is our model. This is just like a random one. This is the UMBC one from today, actually. So what we're looking at is five samples, okay? So the first sample, overall performance. This sample includes all games in the season, and I will adjust the samples, meaning I will remove or pretty much in this case, remove games that I don't think are good, and I'll remove games to basically arrive at a set of opponents with a Ken Palm ranking that is, comparable. So in this case, I happen to get it to the exact same. So my strength of schedule right here, see the asterisk. All my strength of schedule calculation is it's the average Ken Palm ranking of the opponents in the sample. So overall, this sample, the opponents are ranked an average of 260. For this sample for the opposing team, the average KenPom ranking is 260, right? So this is a comparable sample of components. And then we're looking at two spreads below. The first spread you could think of as basically just an average of these two results, while the second spread is the absolute difference. So since there's only two values we're looking at, it's just double. So spread one is just half of spread two. So not too technical here, but that's all it is. So we're looking at these five. This first one overall. The second one is home versus away. So I'm looking at the home team, their sample at home. I'm looking at the away team, their sample of away games. And again, I'm removing some games to arrive at a close as possible Ken Palm ranking for each sample. And then the third average that I like to use is second half of the season. I think it's good. I think it's good to see how the team's been doing second half of the season versus overall. And it's a big sample, it includes, I mean, at this point, it's like a 15 game sample. So I really like that one. I even like it more than the overall because, I mean, teams just play different at the beginning of the season. So that one I really like. And then the next sample that I use is called trailing few. And I say trailing few because it's not always the same amount of games. Again, why? Because I'm adjusting the samples to arrive at a pretty much equal Ken Palm ranking for the opponent. So I'm trying to make the samples, look pretty comparable. And again, I'm just basing that off the ranking of the opponent. So I try to get this number as close as I can to this one. So in this case, look, I got second half of the season for UMass Lowell. The average in this sample is 295. The average in the UMBC sample is 292. So trying to just get a comparable sample for each team, and that's really all there is to it. Once I get that, I'm just looking at the results and averaging all five. And then my last sample here is I call it ranked, but in general, it depends on the teams. Like, so we're looking at teams that are ranked, 220 to 314 in Ken Palm. So ranked in this case is teams under 200. So these samples are going to be teams under 200. You typically use 150. as the starting point. And then again, I adjust that to arrive at a comparable sample for each team. So those are the five averages I use, and then I just average them. And then I arrive at a line here. So in this case, I had UMBC as a 3.6 to 7.32 favorite. And this down here, as you could see in the parentheses, the spread is in the perspective of the home team, right? So if you see a positive spread, that means the home team is the underdog because that means that they're getting points. So here, I thought this spread should be closer to 3.5 to 7, and we were able to get it at 1.5. So attractive value. So that's an example of how I kind of screen for an opportunity. And then once I found this opportunity, I looked for reasons not to bet it. And kind of how I go about that is I'll look at the performance against the spread, which, in this case, I don't necessarily put too much weight on this because it's a small sample. So, yeah, if a team's 9-1 against the spread, that's that is kind of iffy, but it's like it could keep going in a sample size that small. So it could just mean they're undervalued in the market, but I still like to do it just because again, maybe I just don't like the vibe of a team who is just dominating against the spread. And that could be a reason for me to just lay off of it and move on to the next game. So they ended up covering this game, I guess in this. I guess since these games already happened, it's not showing anymore what their performance against the spread has been. But looking at this, right, like, we're looking at like 500 against the spread for UMBC. So I'll basically just look at stuff like that, and then I'll look at the schedules, right? I'll look at the schedules to make sure there's no great reason. I obviously check injuries, that's important. I was looking at Sunday's games, but not gonna probably take any bets on those. But you kind of get the idea of where I'm going. So I'm just looking for reasons not to bet, and I'll go into more detail on that. So moving on to the next slide. So mean reversion and when to avoid bets. So again, after we've screened for potential advantages, we search for reasons not to take the bet. So we're going to look at mean reversion possibilities within the model and also within the schedules. So you've probably seen me do this, but I'll look at trailing few and if it's like, a lot different from the overall, from the second half of season. I like to specifically compare these two. So like if we have a trailing few that's really far off the second half of the season, that's a red flag. So I'll look at that. But in some cases, again, it's like you have to check, like maybe there were injuries. You kind of have to investigate, all right? What is the reason for this difference? And sometimes they're just hot. And if that's the case, could be an opportunity to fade or back a team there. So we're looking within the model and also within the schedules because sometimes the model, it's just an average of games. So sometimes you have to just look at the results and see if they've been winning, see if they've been losing, have they been losing by a lot. So we look at the schedules and again, mean reversion opportunities, they can occur in net result, which is again looking at the schedule, looking at the model, and also in performance against the spread. So a team that's been doing really well against the spread, I mean, if these are 50-50 bets, you would imagine that each team would be around 500 against the spread in the long run. So that's just kind of the thinking behind that. So if a team strays away from 500 during the season, chances are they will kind of revert back to that average of being 500 against the spread. But I don't really place a huge emphasis on that. I'm more so looking at the net result and basing it off of that. But I check anyway, because again, you get that vibe, you you looking at a team that's crushing against the spread, I mean, that could be a perfectly valid reason to just lay off the game. So, and then we also, like, we will look at the model output and then we will try to determine maybe a sample in the model is not good. I mean, we weight them all 20% as the baseline, but I adjust those weights sometimes or remove a sample based on if I just don't think it's relevant. For example, if there's a player that came in second half of the season, or if there is some non-conference play that I just don't think is relevant from the beginning of the season, and et cetera, whatever I end up like kind of determining, looking at the samples and digging into them. And then we basically will just avoid games where potential mean reversion or other factors may override a perceived advantage. So, just for example, we don't like to fade teams off several losses who have a proven ability to win. We do not like to bet teams who have several wins with a proven ability to take some losses. And we don't like to back teams who rely on low percentage shots when they're on a hot streak. So, things like that. And we do not fade Duke in this channel. We do not. It's not worth it, trust me. And then also, we like to conceptualize the qualitative factors. And, this is something that I think provides a bit of an edge on statistical analysis that the books are doing. So these are things like rivalries, focus spots, hostile environments, how important is the game, revenge spots, superstitions, so superstitions is pretty vibe based, but vibes are important when it comes to gambling. They really are. If you get a bad vibe, just move on to the next game. You don't have to bet any of these games. So, for example, with me, like again, I don't bet on Sunday and I don't really bet on games after like 7:30 p.m. Sounds strange, but I win more when I bet on earlier games. So, I don't really take bets after 7:30 p.m. And another reason for that is I like to watch the games I'm in on. So if I'm in on late games, I'm sitting there wasting time watching the games when I can be attacking the lines for the next day. So just stuff like that. Revenge spots too, You lose to a team, you're gonna be angry, People get angry when they lose. So teams that just lost to somebody, when they get that chance to play again, they they go harder. So things like that. And then my last slide here, I mean, kind of goes without saying, but I just want to mention, like gambling, it's not a wise endeavor. It's really not. I mean, it's risky, and at the end of the day, us individual bettors, we don't even have a fraction of the resources that these large betting groups and the books have. So I don't really recommend gambling to anybody. I mean, I just got into it recently. I mean, yeah, I like to think I can find some sort of advantage, but I might just be a narcissistic buffoon. So, yeah, I just don't recommend it to people. But that's why we kind of have the channel. That's kind of why we go over our analysis in its entirety and just let people make their own decisions. Like, hopefully, people can use the information to help them and aren't just like tailing random people's bets online. That's not smart either, but you could win like that too. So, you know, I'm not gonna tell people what to do, but it's not that smart. So, again, unlikely to have a long-term advantage betting. It really is. But is it possible to have a consistent statistical edge in the long term? Maybe. So maybe it is. So there's some reasons why I believe that there could be ways to gain an advantage. And for one, the opening lines are calculated with a highly automated process, and the lines move based on individual betting action. So, what does that mean? That means that you can potentially attack an opening line using your own methodology and get a small advantage, and then you'll see the lines move. So if you get in on a line and that line moves a couple points because other sharp bettors are putting pressure on it, those opening lines could be an opportunity. So and the thing is, most people don't even do that. Most people are just laying bets willy-nilly. I mean, if you're gonna do this, you should be looking at the lines when they open up. you should not be laying bets same day. So that's one thing I kind of just want to mention. And also so this bullet is actually is okay. So like what I mean here is the books do not need to predict the game outcome. So they have great algorithms and whatnot. Obviously, they have a ton of resources, but they're not necessarily like trying to predict the game outcomes because they get their money off of the VIG, which is that 10%. Like you're laying a lot of your bets are minus 110. So as long as the book can basically balance the money within that 10% range, they will make money. So they don't have to be right about anything. They just have to get the money half and half on each side and pick up their 10%. So they limit their risk like that. So the lines can be based more on individual bettors kind of than the algorithms in some cases. So be an edge to be had there. And then another reason. So the books need to set lines for every game. We don't have to wager every game. So we have the privilege of only wagering the games that we like the best. So I like that part of it. You get to you can screen every game and you can only take the ones that you like. So last point. The individual betting market is huge. It's pretty big at this point. Even like the sharp betting action, I mean, can be wrong. So it's like theoretically, the general public can push lines in the wrong direction. And there could be opportunities from that too if you're that sharp, which we're probably not, but we'll try. So I just want to go over kind of some examples of what I'm talking about. We'll start with this one right here. So this is a game that we won, and here we have a minus 1.5, but the model is basically predicting an edge of 2.5 to 5.5, whatever, 2.5 to 5. So this is just a simple example of where I would screen, look at the results, and conclude that it's possible that Missouri is undervalued in this situation. And one thing that I actually really liked about this game, and one thing that really makes me lean towards a team is the when there's just no edge for the home team. Like Mississippi State Bulldogs in this sample, they're losing by 3 at home to teams ranked 90, but Missouri is going on the road versus teams ranked 78 and winning. So that is producing a 2.5 to 5.5 point edge home versus away. So I really like games that I see that edge in. And then again, obviously having an edge in every category is something that I really like. And then so I'll see a game like this and then I'll go to the schedules and just kind of see, okay, maybe should I not do this? So I'll go in here. Missouri versus Mississippi State. They demolished them. That was unexpected, but Mississippi State is just not good. I don't know how they eke out some of their wins, but whatever. So, right, just looking at this game, I don't really see anything here to necessarily, well, again, this win wasn't here, so they're off one win. They win more than once in a row all the time. Like, it looks like their wins come in pairs, especially now. I mean, yeah, they have the one win on versus Vandy, but then they came in versus Arkansas, whose net rating is 20. Arkansas is great, and they did good still. So, like, I look at this and I don't see a reason to back off the Tigers. I mean, they have been doing better second half of the season, so right. I look at these samples and it's not crazy. They're actually kind of doing worse than overall. And then you see Mississippi State, okay, you could see this and be like, okay, maybe this isn't this is an opportunity for a bounce back spot, which, is something that would take me off of the game. But when I looked at the schedule, I didn't really see much of a reason to back off of it because they're just playing worse in conference play than they were at the beginning of the season in non-con. They went on a run here, but it was versus, non-con teams, a lot of them not very good. So yeah, they went on a run here. Could be concerning, but the only good win here is really Texas. Then they went on a long skid, won one game, went on a long skid. So they're losing, multiple times in a row. So it just wasn't enough to keep me off of it. And so I just went with the model and then got the bet. Okay. Let's just check a couple other examples. I like to look at examples of games I lost to, so and try to just like figure out what happened. So again, this game I explained earlier, the Louisville Cardinals depend on the three. It's a low percentage shot, so I'm not surprised that they, skid out here. If you could see, kind of a doing a lot better just last few, even though Clemson is doing a lot worse last few. So it's is plausible just looking at this that it could be a bounce back spot for Clemson, especially looking at the overall, right? Like, yeah, their trailing few is 11, but their overall is 14. Their trailing few is 1.9 versus almost 8 points overall. So I should have honestly looked at the schedule and like known to back off of this just based on Clemson's recent performance, and not to mention they are the home team, so I'm not going to go and pull up the schedule, but ultimately they were off several losses, so and they've proven to win. So this is a team off several losses that has proven that they can win. So it's like I don't know why I took this one, but that's an example of where I should have probably been more careful because there were signs to back off the game. And then this game I didn't bet, but I was talking about taking it, and then I ultimately at the end of the video decided to avoid the large spread. So we're looking at UTEP. I mean, not a good team, so kind of not surprising that they got blown out, but I didn't I wanted to fade the Hilltoppers off a ton of wins, but again, it's not always a good strategy. Obviously, it by itself, that's a terrible strategy. But based on everything together, I wasn't able to get there. And then here's an example of why. So, yeah, overall, I'm only getting 4 to 7.5. But when you look at the home versus away sample, I mean, you're looking at a 13 plus point edge for the Hilltoppers. I mean, so that there alone can be enough for me to just say pass because it's like okay, the model output looks good. It looks like they can cover this game, but they're not doing good for similar teams on the road versus away. And then just looking at this too, it looked good just because, right, they're losing by 9 to teams that are ranked similar to Western Kentucky. So it just kind of shows that the limitations of looking at the numbers sometimes because there's times I'll look at something like this like, oh, they're only losing by 9 to teams that are similar to Kentucky. Okay, but Kentucky is beating teams similar to Western Kentucky by 5 points. So when you look at the difference, it actually gives the Hilltoppers a pretty big edge here. So luckily that was enough to kind of move me off of it. And then this one, okay, so this is another example. I liked this game when I saw this. Yeah, they had like the 10-point advantage for the Bearcats at home, but I was interested in fading the Bearcats at home and fading them in general. But we looked into it and there was a big injury on Oklahoma State. So just things like that, you always got to check the injuries. You never know. It's not even always about the quality of the player who's out, how good he is, but when you have a player out in college ball, like that might be 10 more minutes that somebody has to play. And like running up and down that court for 10 extra minutes when you're just done is hard. So I mean, having players out is not always about like their production. It's also about how tired the rest of the team gets now who has to play more minutes. Last game, Ducks versus Northwestern. So this game is another one where like we had to look at some qualitative factors. And what were those? Those were Biddle. I mean, they got back their one of their best players, and he's been playing amazing. So it's just a different team than it was mid-season. And they're both losing. So even looking at these samples across the whole season, I mean, the Ducks were like kind of close. I mean, Northwestern was a slight favorite in the model, but we had around a 1 point edge and we were getting 3.5. So even not even considering Biddle, this looked okay. Not something I might usually move on. I usually, if I'm looking at something as a pick'em that I'm predicting as a pick'em, I want at least 4.5 points to move on it. I want at least 4.5. I want those, over 2 possessions. Which, yeah, I guess a 3 and a 2 would cover that, but it's more likely that, teams are hitting 2 pointers. So for that reason, I like this game. And then again, you have the qualitative edge of just understanding that Biddle is good. So another win there for us. Okay, so I'm just going to close out and just talk about the upcoming tournament. Pretty excited about it, and just kind of look at some of the top teams and kind of how this works. So, pretty simple NCAA tournament. I'm going to make a bracket. This is my first year actually making a bracket. To be honest, I only started watching college basketball like 2 months ago. But I honestly think the fact that I've never watched college basketball until this year gives me an edge in betting because I'm not biased about anything. I just became familiar with a lot of these teams this year. So I'm into it though. I love it. I mean, I love college basketball. I think it's like one of the best sports to find an edge in betting just due to how many teams there are, and it's like a lot of the teams are relatively comparable, whereas in the NBA, you have some really bad teams, some really amazing teams, some absolute superstars. They're resting players at spots. They're playing a ton of games, a long season. So it's a lot of reasons that you can find an edge in college basketball, especially in these mid-major games. So I enjoy it. So like basically, there's 68 teams that will get into the tournament. 36 are chosen by the committee. So the NCAA has their net ratings, right? So I'm looking at the top 36. There is some nuance because I don't think the committee always picks the top 36 for whatever reason. So kind of strange, but like you could kind of assume for the most part that the top 36 will more or less be the ones getting a bid. And then I just wanted to show the KenPom rankings too. I actually headed this slide wrong, so that's a mistake. This should read KenPom ratings, not net ratings. So this is the KenPom ratings. And KenPom, I mention a lot. It's honestly one of the main reasons why I bet NCAA. It's honestly incredible. So hats off to those guys who are doing that stuff over there. They have a really good statistical analysis of the teams, and they just post it publicly. They post a lot of stuff publicly. They post some good data. It's like a really helpful website if you are wagering on these college games. But I love the Ken Palm rankings. Again, I use this in my model to basically arrive at comparable samples for the team, and it does tend to be pretty accurate for my results this week. So you could tell it kind of is different, right? Like we're looking at these net ratings, and this is basically both as of yesterday. You have teams in the net ratings that aren't even appearing on here. Just for example, Santa Clara making their appearance at 36. They're nowhere to be found in the net ratings, but maybe they should be. You got NC State moving down the list here. Still ahead of Clemson even after. We'll see. We'll see how these all get adjusted after today's game, but you have St. Louis teetering now here after being in the 20s for a lot of the season, but just teetering off a few bad losses. That's all it takes, and you could lose your bid, which is why it gets pretty exciting at the end of the season here. But St. Louis, man, shaky. So they might miss out. I think NC State and St. Louis might lose their bids to some of these other teams that aren't in here. Like, for example, Santa Clara. Probably a better team than them. There's not a bunch of differences. They're obviously using a similar analysis. But for example, I don't see Georgia in the net ratings, but I think they belong here. Maybe not. But I almost like Georgia and Santa Clara better than NC State and St. Louis. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out the next week or so while the season finishes. But there are some teams that are not going to get a bid probably that we're seeing in this list right here. So going to be pretty interesting. And then, so like I just said, 36 are chosen by the committee, but the other 32 are the conference tournament winners, which is another exciting feature of the tournament. So every conference has a tournament at the end of the year, and the winner of that tournament goes to the big dance. It's pretty awesome. It like provides the opportunity for any team to get in if they can win their conference tournament. And a lot of conferences, every team goes to the tournament. There are many where the top 10, the top 8, whatever go, but it just creates a cool opportunity for some teams that aren't so good to get a chance. So these are the conferences I listed here if anybody's interested. But that's kind of all I wanted to go over today. So it was kind of a long video, but hopefully people like it. So that'll be it for tonight. I'll maybe post a video in the morning or maybe list my bets in the comments of this one, but I doubt I'll be taking any wagers tomorrow. I kind of need a day off from all this stuff. So, thank you.